but like I read about it on Wikipedia, and it's definitely my favorite now. And so it's based, so the premise is that aliens live amongst us back on Earth, and we can't see them, but this like random guy just finds these sunglasses, which is part of the reason that I'm wearing sunglasses, and they enable him to see the aliens that are living amongst us, and then he discovers that they're actually controlling humans. And it sounds really scary. Again, have not seen it, will never watch it. Favorite invasion movie.
Okay, I'm making you watch that on this trip while we're out here in deep space. But my favorite invasion film is the camp classic Mars Attacks, directed by Tim Burton. Mostly because I can't get over the fact that he got an all-star cast, somehow convinced them to make this silly film, this parody on space invasions, where they put Sarah Jessica Parker's head on a chihuahua. Anyway, without further ado, we introduce Neighborhood Watch. Captain's Log, Gust 142. We're your co-hosts, Captain Jay Inocencio and Navigator Esh Schlossberg.
Howdy.
And we are from the Space Milk Collective. Grown Up Storytime has sent us as emissaries to the far side of Neptune in this tiny, cramped space pod, so that we can send a secure transmission on the edge of the heliosphere to nearby systems. Our goal tonight is to share 7 human stories in hopes that we can make contact with intelligent life, especially as the pandemic throws Earth's future into uncertainty.
Yes. So, for any of our usual listeners or new listeners from different systems, we ask that you please consider supporting the artists that are part of this project, because we do pay them in dollars. And so we would love for you to support us by sending us a donation, which you can do by using an application called Venmo, and that's spelled VENMO. And you can find us there if you search for Gust Houston. And then you can send us money, and and any currencies are welcome. And also, we invite you to send us stories. Also, all alien languages are cool by us as long as they can be translated into English. And you can do that by emailing us at grownupstorytimehouston@gmail.com.
And so, without further ado, we're going to introduce the first story by Brendan Bourque-Sheil, which is an invasion story. So tell me, Shayna, what's your favorite invasion film?
Cool. My favorite invasion film is They Live by John Carpenter, which I've actually never seen, but it's anyways.
Wait, you haven't seen it?
No, it is way too scary for me to actually watch, but like I read about it on Wikipedia, and it's definitely my favorite now. And so it's based, so the premise is that aliens live amongst us back on Earth, and we can't see them, but this like random guy just finds these sunglasses, which is part of the reason that I'm wearing sunglasses, and they enable him to see the aliens that are living amongst us, and then he discovers that they're actually controlling humans. And it sounds really scary. Again, have not seen it, will never watch it. Favorite invasion movie.
Okay, I'm making you watch that on this trip while we're out here in deep space. But my favorite invasion film is the camp classic Mars Attacks, directed by Tim Burton. Mostly because I can't get over the fact that he got an all-star cast, somehow convinced them to make this silly film, this parody on space invasions, where they put Sarah Jessica Parker's head on a chihuahua. Anyway, without further ado, we introduce Neighborhood Watch by Brendan Bourque-Sheil.
Read by
Michael Neff.
Enjoy!
I love my neighborhood. Cheap rent, pretty quiet most of the time, parties on Sundays with mariachi music, chickens milling around in driveways. Most of my neighbors don't speak the same language as me, which makes this place an introvert's paradise. My one complaint, until recently, was this gang that operated out of the apartment building next to mine. One time they shot a woman who bled all over my car before the medics arrived. So I was not a big fan of their work. Still, when the landlord foreclosed on their place, I was sad to see them go. because I knew once they were gone, it was only a matter of time until the aliens showed up. See, the aliens had been moving in on my block for a long time. On the outskirts of my neighborhood, past the food trucks, the pawn shops, the payday loans, you hit a point where all the houses look the same. All of them are about 3 minutes old, all gray, garish, and gigantic, all with tiny dogs inside them barking madly at any passerby. You might know these structures as McMansions or Hummer houses or garage mahalls, but that's not what they are. They're camouflaged spaceships on the front lines of the invasion. And I bet some of you are saying, wait, are you implying every person who lives in McMansion is actually an extraterrestrial life form? I'm not implying it. I'm outright saying it. They're fucking aliens. I've seen them up close now. One of their ships moved in where the gang used to be. Before then, I'd spent a lot of time near these vessels, but this was my first time living next to one. Walking past it every day, really getting to take in the visual malaise. Medieval torches, fake Venetian balcony, palm trees, pointless columns, garage that looks like a drawbridge, a wall that's nothing but different kinds of windows, a wall that's nothing but blank space, a super phallic fountain sticking up like a giant middle finger to the property brothers, a bulldog in the yard that never moves, and through the foyer window, an obscenely large flat-screen TV that only ever plays NCIS and the Big Bang Theory. And we are normal humans. Look at the shows we watch. They're the most popular shows for normal humans, which is what we are. Bazinga. I used to think these houses were so fuck ugly because the aliens fundamentally don't understand humans. But staring at this Frankenhouse all day, I started to think maybe it's not a failed attempt at human architecture. Maybe it's a successful attempt to destroy the whole concept of human architecture, because that's what it does. By incorporating a little bit of everything, this house successfully becomes nothing. A void with a gray brick facade, and every time I walked past it, I knew my neighborhood a little less. This, I now realized, was phase 1 of the invasion strategy. Purge the invasion site of all humanity one lot at a time. Slowly chip away at the human sense of connection and belonging to their own neighborhood. And I bet some of you are thinking, this seems a little convoluted as far as alien invasions go. Why wouldn't they just blow up the White House with that death ray from Independence Day? Well, consider this. Any alien that tried to pull an Independence Day on us would be playing to our greatest strength as a species. Humans love war. We've been practicing war from the jump. A White House destroying ray gun is probably the one thing left in this world that could unite us. So if I'm an alien trying to get the drop on humanity, I don't challenge us to war. I challenge us to peace, because that's our kryptonite. I move in right next to humans and dare them to peacefully coexist with me, even as I slowly erase them. The invasion on my street is slow going, but they took the street a few blocks down from mine with alarming speed. A part of my nightly walk that used to be full of folk art and South Asian dudes playing cricket in the park slowly turned into a little slice of Orange County. I didn't exactly notice it at first, and then one evening I was being barked at on all sides by toy poodles, Pomeranians, and Italian greyhounds making murder eyes at me through dormer windows. And even though I was less than a mile from where I lived, I felt like I shouldn't be there. This, I realized, is the end game of the invasion. What the aliens ultimately want is to make you think you are the alien. To make us all feel like squatters in our own homes and trespassers on our own streets, so that once they've hiked our rent into the stratosphere and our landlords say it's time for you to leave, we won't fight them on it. We'll just look around at a place we barely recognize and think, well, they finally caught us. And even though I know what they're doing, it still gets to me sometimes. Because even though I live in a 400 square foot studio where everything breaks and I've never been late on my rent in 4 years, I still feel like a freeloader. Like fucking Goldilocks, getting it all in while I can before the real rightful owners of this place come back and chase me off. I have to hand it to those aliens. Well played. I don't know for sure that there's less mariachi music in my neighborhood than there was when I moved in. It's not like I was keeping track, but it feels that way. It feels like there are more toy-sized dogs and less chickens. My rent creeps up, and I know that sooner or later my landlord's going to look at me and say, "What are you still doing here?" I spent a lot of time thinking about my little alien theory because, grim as it is, it's still better than the reality that, of course, there are no aliens, just a powerful human instinct for alienation. But there are moments where the alienation of my block subsides a little, like during the election. I don't speak much Spanish, but all through election week, I kept hearing my neighbors say "naranja pendejo." So I knew that we were all watching the same news. all biting our nails together. And then on Saturday morning, I woke up to cheering and mariachi music blasting, and I knew it was all over. I went on a long walk that night, and even when I got to McMansionville, I felt fine. No matter where I walked, I was never out of earshot of that music.
Well, that story made me really homesick.
I know.
Now I'm concerned how much Montrose is going to be gentrified while we're gone. Speaking of home, have you checked on COVID cases recently?
You know I have, Captain. So here's what we're looking at. In Texas, over 1 million confirmed cases, 19,000 deaths, 10.59% positivity rate. And actually, new daily cases, this is 20,000 almost. Okay, I'm 19,000. It's bad, folks. These are our oxygen masks, but we're actually wearing them in solidarity with our friends back home. Please take care of yourselves. This is serious.
And your families, too. Our next story looks at the tension between science and fiction. So without further ado, we introduce The World in Dad's Eyes by Anonymous.
When I was 9 years old, my dad took me to see Supernova at the Galaxy 16 Cinemaplex. I didn't remember the name of the movie before I started writing this story. The only thing I did remember, burned into my memory, was the final shot of the film. As the aforementioned supernova envelops the spaceship, the last 2 surviving astronauts of the mission escape by entering hyperspace while sheltering in a pod. When they emerge, they have each swapped one eye for the others. I don't know what about that concluding shot was so moving to me, but it may be because my child mind blacked out all of the preceding film. From what I've read, after years in production hell, what remained of this James Spader and Angela Bassett vehicle was akin to Hellraiser in outer space. I shouldn't have been allowed to watch it in theaters. But this was the type of movie my dad and I always watched together when I was staying at his house. Family bonding time on the occasions it did happen with my dad meant sitting in the living room together and silently watching rented DVDs of all variations of science fiction, but more often than not, other bad space exploration action horrors. Pitch Black, Red Planet, Mission to Mars are the ones I remember most clearly and associate with these weekend nights. This ritual set me up to love science fiction for the rest of my life. My tastes began to deviate from his by high school, though. I was less interested in horror and alien attacks and more intrigued by the storytelling, world building, technology, and biology imagined. When I grew up on Resident Evil, I matured into preferring In the Flesh. I watched all 4 seasons of Battlestar Galactica in 6 days while locked in my bedroom in my dad's house during college. The detail alarms me in retrospect. The Portlandia sketch is not off base. But the more I thought about it, the more I remembered what watching the show helped me block out. I remember why I wanted a reason not to leave my room or interact with my father that summer. I remember why I wanted something loud and dramatic to drown out the sound of the YouTube videos about Prozac and Sharia law and the Illuminati. I remember why I didn't want to sit with him for dinner while he explained that he and I descended from intelligent alien life forms, and that's why we were so much smarter than everyone else. My love of science fiction became a love of science and a love of fiction. For my father, he began to mistake fiction for science and science for fiction. Dad and I had not shared anything with each other for many years before he reached this point. By 2003, after a new marriage, I began living with my mother full-time for several years to avoid a hostile home environment at his place. This marriage ended in 2008 when I was 17. And out of a sense of duty, I began living with him again so that he wouldn't be alone. For many reasons, not least of which the fact that I was still a child, I was not equipped to prevent my father from slipping into a dark and lonely space in the grasp of the internet. Maybe he always had been a conspiracy theorist in a way, and he just never talked to me about it. But beginning that year, I learned to quietly wait him out as he explained something or other he'd read or fabricated. As I said, I don't remember a lot of it. I coped by keeping to myself a lot of the time. Over the last 10 years, he mellowed out a little. He has never backed down from his red pill perspective, but he's at the very least learned to not talk about his theories with me. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that he just stopped talking to me about everything. He did not tell me for months about his heart failure that he learned about in 2018. He has been uninsured for 2 decades, but he qualified for treatment at a teaching hospital with all bills waived. And after he told me, I became the dutiful daughter again. I worked hard from Houston with his many friends in his hometown to raise money to sustain him until he could fully recover from the surgery. Many of my friends pitched in with outright donations or with auction pieces, and I am so grateful to them for that. This chapter culminated in May of 2019. By May of 2020, a lot of things about the world had changed, but other than his new heart valve, my father had not. When the pandemic flared up, I called him regularly to make sure he was paying attention and taking precautions. During these calls, he spoke carefully. From his perspective, I simply have not yet woken up to what he knows, but maybe someday I will, and he just has to take it easy with me when he tells me the truth until I am ready to believe it. However, when I asked if he had any masks and if I could send him some in the mail, he let it all come out. He believed the virus originated from a Canadian research lab working on an AIDS vaccine that Chinese researchers visited, stole, and then somehow just let loose into the population before it was ready. Never mind how a coronavirus has anything to do with HIV or any of the other details that fall apart under any scrutiny. This setup would get a low Rotten Tomato score for sure. He refuses to wear masks. He refused to let me buy some to send to him. He told me all the things that by now we have heard many people say, but his ultimate stance on the matter is, if someone dies from this disease, including him, we should just let that be. His life, his friends' lives, theoretically my life, and I did ask him that specifically, isn't worth the inconvenience society has been asked to take. If he was going to be this careless with his own life and others, I wish he'd have let us all know a long time ago. Typically, by now, the dad in the movie has realized that his hubris has caused more harm than good, and maybe everyone should have taken this seriously from the beginning. I am frustrated that this is the way he has decided this story will go for him, but I understand why he is taken by it so easily. It helps make sense of so many things for him. So much of the perceived persecution suddenly made sense with these fictions explaining them away. I haven't called him since this argument. I can no longer entertain these fictions, but I added Event Horizon to my Netflix queue, and I think about him. I know enough about him and his background to understand why it's easy for him to see the world this way. It makes more sense to him as a convoluted plot than real life otherwise would. I don't think he will end up seeing things as I do, though. He's been permanently altered by this point, and I think that by now he is light years away.
Captain, why are you wearing a yellow mesh shirt? Where did you think we were going? Club Neptune?
Okay, if it's good enough for the psychologist on Solaris, it's good enough for me. And that's a very sexy film, and we're about to hear a very sexy story.
Yeah, okay, I guess let's see what you got us into. So our next story is Ego-Powerade Formula by Anonymous.
So, my girlfriend and I are new to this ethically non-monogamous lifestyle. We are officially in an open relationship and we both really enjoy it. We are more on the swinger side of the open relationship spectrum, therefore we like frequenting sex clubs. Before I continue with the story, I would like to say that it just feels good to be with a partner that is as sexually liberated as you are. One Saturday, my girlfriend, Georgia, and I decided to go to a sex club in Austin, Texas. Houston has a shocking number of lifestyle clubs, the most in the state. But there's one club that actually franchises itself and was in both cities. And we were like, fuck it, let's go to that one. We drove for 2 hours with sex toys, blindfolds, alcohol, wearing clothes that easily come off, and condoms in tow. We finally reached the Pink Flamingo Club just north of Austin in a warehouse district. We gathered our things and walked to the entrance, paid the $100 cover, and asked for a tour of the venue. Once you were inside, you could tell it used to be an actual regular-ass nightclub. Here's some of the differences between the two franchise clubs. Austin's is 2 stories, has more space, a pornographic theater, and a stage area for performances. Houston's is 1 story, 1 club room, and 1 big room for public sexy time. Has an open shower, a row of private rooms, and, for good measure, a stripper pole. The upstairs of Austin's is where the sex private partitions are. It does not have a big room for open public sexy time like Houston has. It's quite different in that way. The person that gave me and Georgia a tour was the bouncer. He's a short, muscular guy in a full suit with black gloves on. He's giving us and 2 other couples a very detailed tour and is breaking down all the rules of the club. Most of the rules are about consent. Not just sexual consent, but consent. He's like, this is where you can do that and have consent. This is the bar and consent. Here's where the consensual couples you can dance and fuck are. Georgia and I are thoroughly impressed and excited for the night. We make it upstairs where the theater and private bed partitions are. The bouncer explains you can watch TV here or you can watch the couples if you have their consent. We have a system. There are 5 beds next to each other, separated by thick curtains that are not to be touched. Then we have the front curtains that have a 2-part system. If the thick curtain is closed, that means no watching and no touch or entering. However, if the couple has only the sheer curtain, that means that it's okay for you to watch, but if it is completely open with no curtain, that means you can ask to join in. He was very clear to us. And if I or any of the bouncers see any of you touching the curtains or entering the partition without explicit consent from the couple inside, I will ban you from all of our clubs, no questions asked. Honestly, it felt good that he took his job and consent and safety as seriously as he did. He then explains that after every couple, they change the sheets, pillowcases, and even mattresses if need be. Now, Georgia and I head downstairs after the tour to dance. The club is starting to fill up a little bit. There's all kinds of people and body types entering the club. Their confidence levels are shooting through the roof. It was like when the cool kids enter the party in the movies, but everyone was the cool kid and close to naked. The DJ was vibing. My girl and I were vibing. We even got a swag surf in. It was a small one, and the white people were offbeat, but I'm counting on the main floor, and I look to see this tall, bearded guy walk in. He has these 2 drop-dead gorgeous women with him, both holding each of his hands. They both look like a black version of Jade from Mortal Kombat, while the dude is wearing jeans and a polo. My mouth drops, but Georgia doesn't allow it to hit the floor. Georgia asks, "Do you like them?" "Yes," I answer. We continue dancing, and the triad rocks right by us and head to the VIP staged area. Georgia and I are starting to get the urge for some sexy partition time, so we headed upstairs. As we entered, one of the bouncers was finishing changing the sheets and pillowcases and said we could have it. We jump in. Without hesitation, our clothes are coming off, and we can't keep our hands or lips off each other. I notice that the entering curtain is wide open, so I get up to close it, but Georgia says, "Nah." So I assume to close the sheer curtain instead. Then I hear her say, "Now curtains, I want everyone to watch us." I obliged. Before I could turn my head to see her face, she pulled me in with my back leaning on the wall and her ass facing the open curtain for an audience to watch. She whispers, "I want people to see my ass." Then buries her head between my legs. I close my eyes. We draw a crowd. Then I hear, "Oh my God. Look at the arc of her back. She's beautiful." I open my eyes, and it's the two black Mortal Kombat women looking killer and fixated on Georgia. Let's call them Jade and Katana. Right behind, in the midst of the crowd, is their guy, Jax. My face lights up, and Georgia's head raises, turns back, and faces me and asks me if I want them to join. Yes! Now, the four of us are playing in one queen-size bed. I'm playing with Katana, and Jade grabs a dildo and starts playing with Georgia. It was freeing. The bouncer was making sure that people didn't get too close as an excuse to watch us a little more closely. Jade came to me and asked if her husband Jack could join. Honestly, I felt like we didn't have enough space, but on the other hand, I kind of had to say yes because I'm literally fucking his wife and their girlfriend. I say yeah. And Jade crawls out of bed in high heels and a strap-on to speak to Jax. It kind of looked like she was trying to convince him to come. Okay, if I have to be honest again, I was hoping he'd say no, but he didn't. Georgia and Jade both began giving him fellatio while Katana and I kept playing with a lot of stimulation going on, and as you can imagine, a lot of noise. But I'm keeping an ear open for Georgia. We are all practicing safe sex, and we have plenty of condoms, but I hear Georgia and Jade say phrases like, "Oh, that's okay," or "You can do it, babe," and "It's not a big deal." While I'm eating a face full of purring private parts, my internal monologue is saying, "Dude, what's the problem?" Georgia and Jax begin engaging with each other, and Jade winds up leaving the bed altogether. So, it's two couples on one bed, and each couple is doing 69 to each other. The way we were positioned was Jax and I were head to toe with our backs on the beds, and the women were on top of us. I hear gagging coming from my end, and I'm flattered. Then there's gagging from Jax and Georgia, and my internal monologue is like, cool. Katana repositions herself for a brief moment. I turn my head to the left, and I see the dick that Georgia is gagging on. Georgia, my girlfriend, is fake gagging on the smallest dick I've ever seen in person. For context, if you do a thumbs up, then you have a scale of the actual size. I just look forward as my eyes widen and then recall the pep talk that Georgia and Jade had to give Jax when he first came to the bed. My internal monologue kicks in again saying, "You have the audacity to be with two women with a dick that small? Where do they sell that kind of confidence at? No wonder Jade has a strap-on dildo readily available. I need some of that Ego-Powerade Formula ASAP." Clothes reappear. Katana and Jax both ask us to join them in the VIP area. Georgia is all eager and super nice, like, "Yeah, that'll be fine." They finally leave. The crowd dissipates. The bouncer gives us two thumbs up and a Coca-Cola smile. Georgia starts to leave out the partition bed. I grab her by the arm, pull her back, and vigorously close the thick curtain. I whisper yell, "Georgia, why are you fucking gagging on his small dick like that?" I like sucking dick and I like to gag. "Why are you gassing him up though? He doesn't deserve that level of gagging you were giving him." She was like, "Yeah, it was small, but I just wanted him to feel good about himself. You know, he had a fragile ego." Now, my girlfriend is the kind of person to cuss out a guy on Tinder for asking her the wrong question. Now, she's worried about some stranger's small-dicked ego. I know I'm not carrying a forearm in my pants, but I definitely know that it's not a thumb. She says, If you must know, it's weird that us women are kind of programmed to please men. Yeah, it's stupid and at times infuriating, but it happens. No different than faking an orgasm. This information I've been told, but to see a woman actively please someone and stroke their ego, pun intended, while it's not being reciprocated was shock and awe to me. Also, babe, you had a whole other woman on top of you and you couldn't enjoy yourself because you were so worried about another man's dick? Sounds like you have the ego issue. She opens both curtains, buttons up her dress, and turns back to me. Are you coming downstairs with me, or are you going to stay up here and think about dicks for the rest of the night?
So was that a sci-fi story, or are you just horny in space?
Okay, two things can be true at once, but listen here. That was absolutely sci-fi. I don't know, I know it doesn't mention aliens or it doesn't take place in space. It's about swingers, but swingers imagining a non-monogamous relationship. And the whole point of sci-fi is to think about these alternative futures and to stage these other possibilities. It doesn't always have to be aliens and monsters and end of the world gloom and doom and all this other stuff. It can just be about thinking through alternative lifestyles. This is a core idea behind futurity. And this is why Eyes Wide Shut is also a sci-fi. This is why Paris, Texas by Wim Wenders is a sci-fi. And this is why all these other things, because you just can't think beyond your own definition of what sci-fi is.
Okay. For our next story, we're gonna hear something a little more traditional. Introducing Computer, Smashing Pumpkin Spice Latte Extra Sweet by Mary McCall Pineda. Beam us up, Mary.
Computer, Smashing Pumpkin Spice Latte Extra Sweet. I love Star Trek. Really love Star Trek. Star Trek was not cool when I was growing up, at least not to the people around me. I didn't have friends to connect with about how hopeful, how inspiring, and how incredibly dynamic these stories are. For the longest time, I was ashamed of how much I liked it, so I hid my love for Star Trek, and for all things sci-fi for that matter. I would stay up late watching Voyager by myself and dream about a world where a person like Catherine Janeway led a crew in a badass spaceship around the galaxy. I wanted to live in that world. I wanted to know other people who saw the excitement and the beauty of that world. I secretly always wanted to go to the Star Trek conventions and dress like my favorite characters and have friends to talk to about what I thought would happen next or what the worlds were like beyond the shows. I wanted to be cool, to fit in, so I never talked about these things with my friends growing up. But as age will do to a person, I realized that nerding out about what you truly like is way better than keeping these things inside. I became unabashedly loud about my adoration for all things Star Trek. I started watching Trek every night and excitedly talking to anyone that would listen about how universal these stories are. I figured the louder I was, the more likely I would be to find friends that shared my excitement. I was on a mission to find Star Trek friends. My partner is a really good sport, and though he isn't as into Star Trek as I am, he is really into indulging my excitement. So, for one Halloween, he agreed to dress up as Star Trek characters with me. I had been watching Deep Space Nine for several months, so naturally the obvious choice was for us to be Jadzia, Dax, and Worf. I had been practicing creating prosthetics with latex, and this was the perfect opportunity to marry these two passions. I created a Klingon prosthetic for him, and I practiced painting on my trill spots for me, and sewed us 2 DS9 uniforms to canon for when Jadzia and Worf were officially a couple. I spent a good 4 hours getting us ready for the Halloween show we were going to. My partner even let me shave his facial hair to match Worf's. I told him that even if one person connects with us over the costumes, I would consider all this work a success. I spent days preparing my partner to act like Worf, to say things Worf would say. I needed him to be in character. I knew it was more likely he'd get interactions than I would, so I needed him to be perfect. We were headed to Walter's downtown for my favorite Halloween gathering, the Halloweening. We entered the venue, said hi to a few friends, and a couple of people came up to us to engage, but no one was getting it accurately, and honestly, I was getting a little annoyed. Like, someone thought he was a Vulcan? I mean, come on, man. A Vulcan? Give me a break. It's not like he was even dressed up as a Romulan and they thought he was a Vulcan. At least I would understand that. And maybe a casual fan would make that mistake. Now, if you aren't a Star Trek fan, let me break it down real quick so that you know just how super silly this era was. It's like if I were holding a puppy and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, wow, I really like your bird." I was offended, to say the least. That was most definitely not the person I was looking for. The night was wearing on, and we got several Vulcan salutes, which, okay, it was nice seeing that out in the real world, and who doesn't want to hear people telling you to live long and prosper? But I was still holding out for that moment when we encountered someone that really got it. We made our way to the bar. I was about to have that moment. I had been going to these Halloweening events for years, and every year the show brought out the best in the local Houston music community. I had actually come to the show to catch the band that was wrapping up as we found a spot at the bar, Smashing Pumpkin Spice Latte. My friend Joe produced this event and always had an equally ridiculous and amazing mashup cover band to take the stage for one night only. I looked forward to it every year. I usually knew the people he was playing with, but this time he was playing with someone I didn't recognize. When they got off the stage, that person came toward us as we were sitting at the bar. He was making a beeline for us. He approached us with such purpose it was like he knew us, but since I definitely didn't know him, he must know my partner, Jose. Without a pause, upon arrival, he had stopped right in front of Jose and he asked, "Are you drinking prune juice?" Holy shit! The moment has come! I was bursting! I was giddy, gleeful of all the things to say. Only a true Trekkie would know that Worf only drinks prune juice at bars. We had prepared for this. Days and days of watching episodes of Worf. I tried to pour all of my knowledge into knowledge of the world, their relationship, and this character into Jose's mind. But then, my partner just stood there, quietly, staring, frozen, not responding. The guy stared back, waiting on the edge of his anticipation. Those few moments of silence hung in the air like an eternity for me. I looked at Jose, waiting for him to respond, "Why, yes, of course, it's a warrior's drink," or to raise his glass and simply shout, "Kaufla!" But instead, he forgot all our preparations and said nothing. I could not bear it, and I spoke for him, which, reflecting now, is actually rather perfect, considering Worf and Jadzia's relationship dynamic. Of course she would interject when Worf would turn silent. Jadzia is after all the outgoing one and took no mind when Worf got antisocial or all weird as he would often do. Anyways, let me get back to the story because I really could go on and on about Jadzia and Worf all night long. I interjected and I told him that my sweet partner was humoring me and I am the Trekkie here. We exchanged conversation in a flurry, touching on Guinan and Ten Forward, the continued relevance of Trek storylines, the brilliance of Captain Sisko. It was a genuinely nerdy exchange. I felt a deep satisfaction that only comes after connecting with a stranger in such a fun way. We friended each other on social media, and unsurprisingly, he turned out to be a very cool person that I still get to connect with over all things Star Trek. Once CBS released the newest series, Star Trek Discovery, we started a club with another committed Trekkie, and for over 3 years now, we have been discussing the Federation and the truly magnificent world that Gene Roddenberry gave us decades ago. Star Trek shows us what our future could be. Star Trek is hope. Star Trek brings people together.
What you reading, Shayna?
Well, Captain, our next story is about using sci-fi as a vehicle to combat racism. And it was heavily inspired by the show that I have been binge watching out here and during quarantine called Lovecraft Country, which is set in the Jim Crow era South and repurposes the stories of H.P. Lovecraft to demonstrate the horrors of racism. I introduced The Blanket by Liyen Chong.
The blanket. It's morning, and the sun is streaming through the windows. The heroine lies asleep on her bed, backlit by the light. A summer blanket covers her body. The blanket slowly slides off her body, as if pulled by gravity, exposing her torso. Annoyed by this rude awakening, and with eyes still shut tight, the woman reaches with her free hand and yanks the blanket back, angrily, as if to assert her right to sleep. But I know it isn't sliding on its own accord, because the wide-angled camera shot from directly above the body shows me it's being pulled from her slumbering body by a pair of disembodied hands, horrifically torn off from their wretched owner. In these few seconds, a stir of recognition awakens in me. It stunned me because it was almost as old as I was. I knew this particular feeling of not being able to be at home, in your own bed, in a new house, in an unfamiliar setting. I had been watching Lovecraft Country, a genre-blending, code-switching TV series centering the lives of predominantly black characters set in the 1950s Jim Crow era. Letty, the heroine, had just bought a grand old house in a predominantly white neighborhood, and she, her sisters, and her housemates were facing the ugly racism of its residents. During that time, my parents would have been the children of first and second generation Chinese migrants growing up in the Southeast Asian British colony of the post-war, pre-independent Malaysia. In all my years of watching horror, this was the first time I gained an insight that reached deep into my own childhood. My fears as a child were focused on fleeing or protecting myself from the supernatural kind, especially when it was dark. Every night before falling asleep on my bed as a child, I would pray to the God I had learned about in the missionary-founded schools I attended to protect me from the list of malevolent beings that I encountered on television and in books. In words, mouths, in half-deep breaths and quiet whispers, the same prayer was repeated every night. Dear God, please protect me from the... etc., etc. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. As I grew older, the list grew longer. My mind is now hazy on how the list was ordered, but it definitely included the usual suspects of Western literature, such as vampires, werewolves, and zombies. Then, from religion, Satan, the devil, and I think Lucifer. There were also the more regional supernatural beings. They were more fearful because I couldn't find any literature on them. There were the Thoils, golem-like creatures conjured from dead fetuses, kept alive through blood from their owner's toes. Pontaniacs, blood-sucking beings who were jilted lovers who died from suicide and lived in banana tree groves. Ghost, banshees, will-o-wisps, poltergeist, I named them all. It was as if by naming them I could remind God of all the things he might have forgotten to protect me from. My cotton covers were drawn right up to my neck every single night to prevent blood from being sucked from my throat. My feet never dangled past the bottom of the bed, no matter how tall I grew. I do not remember when I stopped this prayer for safety, but this childhood fear of the dark and unknowable persisted strongly until my late teens. I did not enjoy horror movies until I was 30 years old, and I still remember feeling uncomfortable if my bed covers were not arranged just so as late as 5 years ago. It seems as though fear was a thing that pervaded and engulfed the peripheries of my boring middle-class childhood, and it may have something to do with having been left in the sole care of my father and his parents when I turned 3. We had just migrated to Australia in the early 1980s. Upon seeing my brother play all by himself one too many times, my mother made the choice to move the family back home to Malaysia. Under the rules of an Australian skilled occupation visa, it would have been permissible to keep the visa a further 5 years if we stayed on for a full year. We stayed on for a full year, but 6 months of it passed without my mother, who was faced with the impossible choice of keeping her teaching career back home in Malaysia or staying on in Australia and working in a horrible job no one respected her for. I don't remember missing her or feeling the feeling of being sad. Was it because she told me not to miss her and I obeyed her missive like a solemn 3-year-old child would obey the dearest thing in the world? Perhaps not missing her was what my father and my grandparents needed to hear from me. Looking back on it now, I was probably still too young to go without my mother for nights on end. It was around this time when I would tell strange and bizarre stories about a man or men in the dark outside the edges of my undrawn window at night, magically entering my bedroom and leaping into my ear as I laid down to sleep at night. It was eerie, but the adults tried to brush it off as just imagination. Was it the dark outside the large window panes at night that felt mysterious to me? Did someone look in and stare with curiosity at an Asian child? In my half-slumber, was I terrified by a face that did not look either like my father's or my mother's? Did my heart beat so hard in my ear as I laid on the pillow that it felt like tiny little men shoveling their way into my head at night? Did I hide under my blanket, waiting for my apparition to do unspeakable things to me? The blanket slowly slides off her body. In that moment, I recognized the feeling of being exposed as a child to the particular ghost that haunted me. I mean, I knew the story of my mother had to go back to Malaysia, and that she had been extremely concerned about how this affected me. I knew it was my head, but I did not know it was in my own body. It was as if my amygdala, my lizard brain, and human smoke alarm let slip to me where the faulty connection lay between imagination and danger. We would have been living in a predominantly white neighborhood, and while we didn't stay long enough to experience overt racism, we were not exactly welcomed either. Australia had only begun allowing non-white migrants to apply for skilled occupation residency less than a decade earlier. Incidentally, as a result of the civil rights movement in the U.S. Judging by comments from Asian friends who grew up in New Zealand around the same time, the dehumanizing microaggression one would have faced would have been considerable. Back home in Malaysia, my parents continued to contend with the racism and corrupt living conditions they were familiar with until I was old enough to travel to New Zealand to finish high school, where my father continued to earn a living elsewhere, allowing me to study in a first world country. No cakewalk, though, since my ghosts still follow me around. But I digress, since this is not the point of the story. The blanket slowly slides off of Letty's body by dismembered hands. She yanks it back and flips around with eyes still closed. A moment later, a black woman with bloodshot eyes rises by Letty's bedside and stares at her. Her slightly grayed hair is tied low at her neck, and as she rises, she reveals a missing jaw, gruesomely reminiscent of the visual artist Kara Walker's horrific tableaus of slavery. Letty has no idea of the kind of violence and malevolence that awaits her outside her home because she happens to be black. And indoors, in a house not purpose-built for her ancestors' comfort and shelter, the horror continues. I understood something of this deep in my body because it fired up an old neural pathway that was scabed and scarred over until my neurons had twisted comfort into unease and an inability to stay completely at home in my own skin. I am grateful for this truly needed transformation of H.P. Lovecraft's original sensibilities. However, if anything, this moment underlined to me as I got older how much I crave content that comes from a different point of view other than the mainstream. In seeing this, I became more human. I recognized myself.
Well, what do we have next, Captain?
Looks like it's Bayou City Burn by Astrid Lange. Enjoy!
I'm frantically scrambling escape plans in my mind. I could sneak over to the toll road via Cavalcade or reverse down Durham all the way to Allen Parkway. Oh, thank goodness for the Peel-Matic. Long-haul drivers had urine bottles forever. Slightly passionate cross-country astronauts' diapers, but the Peel-Matic, it's more than just a bed panel funnel adaptation for women travelers. It releases me from the chains of the pullover and squat vulnerability. Besides, to get out of the car now, the inner lane of the 610 headed toward the 59 gallery is split. No, that's certain death. You see that smoke there on the twisted metal on the highway divider? Barbecue. The other choice, if you try to pull over, catch a few minutes of rest here, armed robbery. Yeah, Peel-Matic, baby. It's a lifesaver. It's been 36 hours for me. The line of cars at the gas station along the feeders around Loop 610, the entirety of Loop 610, remain insurmountable. I just saw a fireball envelop the Chevron at the Bel Air exit. I shit you not. So much for ATM skimmers at that pump. I don't know though. I'm kind of numb to it, you know? And the rest of us, inching along painfully. Look, dark red, stripes on Google Maps, traffic alert. Yeah, I see through car windows and then through theirs, and there is a couple, and both of them were topless. The woman is forcefully banging her hands on the dashboard with every outburst, and there is a 30-year-old man just crying, alone, tears streaming down his face as he clutches the steering wheel, looking neither left nor right, just 1,000 yards, staring at the wide ribbons of brake lights undulating on the horizon. Everyone has to come through, is what Samir has pled, his earnestly quavering voice message, arriving simultaneously on our friend group phones. Y'all are my world. Me is my world. This is it, you guys, please. So here we are, scattered in a ragtag pattern across the city, our brake lights forming a rough constellation amid the galaxy clutters of other brake lights of other people on seemingly equally important missions of what exactly? I mean, why did he have to pick Black Friday to do this? Ragtag group of us indeed. Houston's a big city, fourth largest in the nation. No, is it second largest now? And population growing every day with refugees from California, and Detroit, and Chicago, and San Antonio, and beyond. And there are more languages spoken here than, well, spoken on Aswanga. Yeah, Aswanga. This is Houston. We don't do public transport. We do every type of motorized vehicle and mod to defiantly traverse the unending sprawl from Ducatis, Lambos, McLaurens to duct-taped shimmying claptraps whose mufflers will fall off if you even look at them sideways, lifted big dick trucks, hell, motorized wheelchairs. You know what? Grandma Bonnie was particularly known in Garden Oaks for trundling across 8 lanes of rush hour North Shepherd gridlock in her Medicare-driven Spitfire mobility scoot to get to CVS. Her red-haired short wig always kind of like, knocked askew by the potholes. And she had one of those yapping Pomeranians in her lap. Yo, I remember when Cousin James got blind drunk and rode one of them Walmart motorized shopping scooters across the parking lot to surprise her in a sidewalk race. Guess what? Cousin James has a rap sheet now, and the Pomeranian is 6 feet. I'm rapping now. This is why I don't talk to family anymore. It's also why I ended up in this pickle, along with at least, 1 million, 2 million more Houstonians? Nah, H-Town wannabes. Look at them. You can tell when it rains. They all turn their hazard lights on in the rain. I bet you do too. I mean, I just wanted to pick my family, what's thicker than water? What? Mud. That's what. No, blood. Blood's not word squat. And I thought I found my tribe, a real community, like weirdos like me, creative, expressive, others who thought improv was it. A diverse group, performers, all colors, all genders, all of us, weird as fuck. Our favorite saying, I got your back. Hey, got your back. Got your back. Got your back. Yes, and. Yes, and. Got your back. Huh. Samir, me, Mateo, Andrea, Devin, Mirren. Don't let your scene partner die on stage. Don't let your scene partner die. Those were rough days, the virus. The darkened times. Station theater was where it was at. Without that tribe, without that community, and our little group, our little troop within was we were like fire ants clinging to each other in Imelda floodwaters, ragtime, savage, I'm saying fierce. Ugh. Got your backs. Anyway, yeah, so. When Samir begged each of us yesterday morning for us to get him what he needed for the perfect proposal to me, what do you do? So yeah, I was exasperated and I was rolling my eyes as he begged us to separately handle the ring, the flowers, the illegal party favors, the illegal fireworks, for Andrea to bring her guitar, for Mirren to come with a custom poem. I was frustrated at it being Black Friday and how goddamn gushy he was, but him and me feel like hope, and hey, to be real, I had a tiny sense of satisfaction and melt of gratitude at me being needed. I mean, come on. But that was 36 hours ago. And none of us have been able to get across the mindless sprawl to the rainbow room. Karmageddon. That's what I called it. I knew it was going to be bad before I even left the house. Look, I went on the DL when they started putting those computer chips in everybody's arms. Hey, I can take yours out. I can take you to Mooch's to do it. He's one of those OG urban animals that skated through Montrose. Yeah, that underground army who took over downtown parking garages by the full moon with the bats rushed out nightly from under the bridge. I swear it won't hurt. Oh, you're right. Yeah, I'm wearing all black. This mission brings out my inner goth, my numbers persona, my Mortal Kombat maggot colony wardrobe. Yeah, I've got money and a knife stashed in my left boot and an 8 of Tina stashed in this one. And 3 decades worth of H-Town backstreet road skills behind this wheel, baby. Gonna make it out this one. This Karmageddon, this apocalypse, shoot. Probably gonna be the only one in the group to do it. No, you know who else will make it out? Baldina the King. Baldina the King. Know that name? Yes, Baldina the King. Yeah, anyone who trail riding raps with him. The next song that's about to play in here, hold up. Yeah, you don't, yeah, you know it, don't you? Come on, I mean, yeah. Thanks. I know it's hot. Styling and profiling, baby. Yeah, perfect for picking up a sweet little diamond ring from Anthony Dang in Sharpstown. He appreciated the fashion statement. Ballsy, just like him, merchant of chaos. That's me. Yeah, so those computer things. Those computer chips, they put them in when reuniting all Americans after the, you know, the darkened times. The I've got scars too, pock makes on my face from the virus. Wait, I see you don't. So fresh you are. Yeah, they thought that giving us all the same traditions triggered by Bluetooth would do it. Now, the annual pilgrimage to Disney World, the staff boil burst of Black Friday consumption. I know you can't help being out here. Yeah, they thought, oh, hell yes, I scored the ring. I went to Forgotten Streets, Hempstead Highway, you know. Here, I scored a bottle of Lane for Samir and Nee. Chopped and screwed, baby. Have a sip. A purple sip. Oh, so warm. I tell you, you landed in the right car tonight. I'm the only one to score anything for the happy couple in love. You seen how all the bodies piled up, all bloody in the parking lots? Galleria, Guns Point, Memorial City? Everyone else? Orbiting endlessly for parking spaces, unable to leave their cars or stop, going on, what? Hour 37 now? Look, I gotta go. No, you can't follow me. Oh, did that gigantic flaming spool hitting the Camry in front of us startle you? Oh, they don't have those in Connecticut, do they? Yeah, you're funny. And you're cute, but you belong to the day, like rice or something. You're not. Okay, I'll feel your bicep. Sure, yeah, show me how strong you are, cowboy, Connecticut. Hold up, that slides. Real nice. That's real nice. Damn it. Look, grab the longboard out the back. I've got my skates. We're gonna ride the hidden concrete bayou trails. No, wait till just after the next flaming spool soars overhead. I'll kick the door open, drop, run, leap, over the edge. I got your back. Just yes and anything that comes, you'll learn. My name? Oh, honey, that's right. I never introduced myself when I picked you up all terror-stricken off the median at 45. Why, I'm the mystery queen of the night. Rowdy.
Well, folks, we've only got one more story left this evening, but we wanted to take a moment to thank you for joining us, the Space Milk Collective, as we took these stories to the far side of Neptune and broadcast them out into space.
And as a reminder, if you want to support the artists who are part of this show tonight, please find us on Venmo at Gust Houston.
All right, and without further ado,
our next story is an excerpt of the most accurate account of history as it concerns y'all, or House of Mirrors by Reyes Ramirez.
Enjoy!
An excerpt of the most accurate account of history as it concerns y'all, or House of Mirrors by Reyes Ramirez. This house is so big that I didn't even notice when the world had ended. What happened was I discovered a new room beyond the mini theater that held the Patriarch's booze collection. I figured out the password to the door lock by putting in the birthday of one of the children, 1231, which I discovered from reading said child's journal they hid in the night table next to their bed. I walked into the room and saw years of craft colonialism. Beers from all over the world. 8 different cachacas from Brazil, mezcal from 12 regions of Mexico, several brandies from 6 European countries, independent bourbons and moonshines from Dixie states, wines, gins, whiskeys, etc., etc. I'll be real. I drank as many as I could, which was 3 beers, doubles of local Houston breweries, since those wouldn't be too hard to replace if they found out they were missing, long sips of vodka that had been opened already, and a glass of brown fluid from a crystal decanter. I figured whatever this white family paid me to take care of this McMansion as they went out on vacation to the Bahamas, it wasn't enough. So I drank. And I passed out. When I woke up with a hangover the size of a dying star, I went to the kitchen downstairs to drink water and saw an entire ocean of darkness outside the gargantuan windows. The windows are the size of a theater screen broken up into 3 panels along one wall that goes up into a vaulted ceiling where a crystal chandelier hangs redundantly. I'm telling you, this place is a fucking bondo. Well, I looked outside one of the windows and saw nothingness. A nothing so deep that I only saw myself. I figured this was part of an exotic alcohol hangover, so I thought nothing of it. I sipped some artisanal water and slept on a cashmere couch in the living room to get this all out of my head. And when I woke up again, the darkness was still there. Unfathomable, yet absolute. Imagine closing your eyes and not even seeing those wandering, fizzy sprinkles of light from dying brain cells or whatever. Well, I turned on the 60-inch HD TV, and none of the channels worked. Just more black screens reflecting my clueless ass. I looked on my phone and neither the Wi-Fi or cell network worked. Well, it's weird because the chandelier lights were on and water flowed from the nickel-plated faucets and the LCD refrigerator screen sleepily hummed. I tried to call my friend who'd set me up with this job, but the only line beeped thrice and died. Well, everything worked as it might or ought, but there was nothing to access outside of all this functioning. I waited, although I wasn't really sure what for. I sat on a leather chair until my anxiety turned into ennui, which was about an hour. At which point, I opened the front door and looked for something to understand. Again, just nothingness that began where the doorframe ended. Not even my reflection appeared in this blackness. Well, perhaps out in the distance, I saw a tiny beam of light. I wasn't sure if this was a truth or my mind tricking itself into finding an answer, so I tested out this darkness by throwing random shit I found into it. A fountain pen, an amethyst geode paperweight, a gold-plated desk lamp. Nothing made a sound, as though they didn't land on any ground. They all just became gone. Like they never existed. So I went and I grabbed bigger stuff. A leather office chair on wheels, a 5-foot chrome floor lamp, and a cherry oak wooden chair from the dining room. I placed the dining chair back down on the floor and kicked it bottom first out the door, enough so the top still jutted from the abyss. I then took the lamp and poked the shade through to try and hit the cushioned seat of the chair, but nothing happened. I fed the lamp through the doorframe until I couldn't, the heavy base resting in my hands. And when I pulled the lamp back out, only the base and like a few inches of the lamp's pole survived. I studied its end, and it's just the chrome-plated tube and the wires hiding inside itself. Inside left. And so I picked up what was left of the kitchen chair, and the same thing happened. A handful of nice wood. Whatever went in literally became fucking nothing. And though I dropped out of Physics 1301 after 2 classes, I was pretty sure I was a PhD in this new fuckery. And because you do shit more than once in experiments, I pushed the office chair through to see if maybe all those things piled up on some other side, but nope. I pushed and it's going through without resistance, but this is where I fuck up. Because the chair's weight disappeared as I pushed it through the door, and I was offset and slightly tripped. The tip of my right pointer finger gazed the darkness. I don't know if my nervous system detected something, but my first instinct was to put my finger into my mouth like it was a burn. But no. You see, there's no fingertip to suck. I look at my finger and, yep, it's gone. The tip's gone. There's just a smooth, bald end to my pointer finger down to the beginning of the intermediate phalange. It didn't hurt. It's just gone. You ever realize something dire and your heart escalates in pace instinctively? Like right after you close your locked car door with the keys inside, or said something mean to someone you really care about that you should have just kept inside your head? Well, in slow motion, I felt my body initiate that process, anticipating some sort of great pain to begin and never end. I couldn't stop looking at what was missing. It took everything in my being to not think about what every waking moment of my life will now be without my fingertip, and a tear erupting out of my right eye. But yeah, a pain never happened. I'd forgotten to breathe, and that's what broke me out of that trance, the need for air. I swallowed deep gulps of oxygen until I took control and started breathing in through my nose and out my mouth. I could finally move the rest of my body, and the first thing I did was slam the door so fucking hard that my hair lifted. I stepped away from the foyer and sat on the armrest of the couch. I fell backwards and hit the cushions with a soothing thud. I looked up at the blinding chandelier through strains of my hair until I felt numb. I fell asleep. I woke up and nothing had changed. I tried my phone again, but it's the same shit. I now lived in a world of inaction. So I followed its lead. I stayed laying there for I don't know how long, thinking about what all this meant. Well, there's no way that I was just alone in all this, right? I mean, had this house been solely transported to some alternate dimension void by some Hadron Collider clownery that white people are always fucking with? Or had the entire Earth been covered in a blanket of dark matter that came hurtling in from outer space that settled into its current mold forevermore? Or maybe it was just this neighborhood because God or whoever wanted to punish the rich white elites for hoarding wealth, and I just happened to be taking care of one of their homes at that time. That's, that'd be bullshit. But I'd understand if that was the case. After all, when would brown people not be taking care of white people's stuff? I mean, one of us had to bite this turd sandwich, and I suppose it was my draw. Wait. And then I realized I was still technically at work. That I'd be eternally at work, maybe? Give us. But this is the primary flaw with thinking. You only see what's wrong at first, and your mind starts crying and crying. But this existential crisis has spiraled me into a point. I should perhaps do my job to get a grounding in reality until this thing blows over and the whites come back. If this is my life now, well, I can cross that T when my brain accepts it. I look at my finger and see it's new 100%, which is how my mom always taught me to think of loss. Like, rather than think of paying $800 for rent out of your $1,100 check as only having about 27% to survive on, think of those remaining $300 as the true 100%. Now, life takes its cut. Siempre. So, 100% is always relative to what you hold on to or let go of. When you accept that law of gravity holding chumps like me down to this mortal coil, then the world becomes that much more navigable. Which is all another, albeit long way of saying make use of what you got, which is a clunky way to say YOLO, which in turn leaves all that nuance out. And really, that's what you're here for. The point I'm making is being stuck here is my new 100%. And there's still gravity plastering me to this couch. In times like this, I turn to masturbation to give me the proverbial pick-me-up jolt that I employed during all-nighters or to get me out of a spell of debilitating boredom. Since there's no internet or cell network, the issue of now living in a world without infinite pornography to aid me in this endeavor is something I'd rather not think about solving sober. New 100% is all. I start to walk back up the booze room to maybe drink myself into a creative yet intensely focused spell. I remember seeing a cognac that once had a commercial where a woman at a bar ordered it on the rocks. After gulping it down, she raises one of the ice cubes to her red lips and licks it like the small of a bat. Well, as I go up the stairs, the giganto windows are still contain an impenetrable abyss, like an empty theater screen you stare into for a movie that never starts. I see, however, my ghost staring back, waiting, too, for something to begin. It mimics each of my movements in a shade of gray, as though mocking me. I use my new finger to stretch the bag under my right eye south, revealing glassy flesh under my eyeball. It dawns on me that I could actually be the ghost.